is a bit crunchy.
That sounds bad. Are we live?
Yeah, I think
Looks like
we're
we're
live.
live.
Yeah.
Hey! And of course, my thing is like stuck.
Hey everyone.
Hey everyone. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can
Can you
see
hear me?
you. I can
Okay,
hear
good.
you. Slightly delayed, but you're
Excellent.
there.
Okay, here we go. It's just being difficult for me over here, which is not great. Here we go. Now I can get into the comments and see what people are saying if they have anything to say. But hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Wargame Archaeology. Fred and I are back with lots of good reading done and stuff that we could talk about. How you doing today, Fred?
I'm doing well. I'm back, and it's the first time since the big drama. I know that you've canceled me for a while. Now I'm finally uncancelled, and I'm happy that I'm back. I,
Uncancel.
yes, I promise to be careful this time. I would be very careful. I know that Alistair is in there waiting for me to just slip something and have fun for a week, but I'll do my best. I will stay in line. I will.
For the record, this is actually is late because we had it scheduled and Fred rescheduled it because he bought a house.
Yes. Yeah, that did change a few things, and it might actually change a bit my schedule in the future because I'm moving back to France. Yeah, new house. Actually, going there tomorrow to sign the contract and everything, and then I should be back home for the first time in a bit more than 6 years. I should be back home mid-April. So I think it might change a bit the schedule on the channel for a while and everything, and I will rethink a few things. But yeah, it's a pretty exciting move. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, so we had to postpone quite a few things. I had to postpone quite a few projects that I had on the channel too. So it was not just that I didn't want to be here. But yeah, I was happy to finally have a bit of time to go through the volume 3 of the general. It was quite fun. I'm actually quite excited about what we're going to talk about. There's some really good stuff in this volume number 3. It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. Hang on. My boyfriend just texted me on the way home from work and I'm letting him know that I'm live so he does not come in.
Yes, it could be fun.
Yeah. He always gets
If,
really embarrassed at the thought that you might be on camera. It's very cute, actually.
okay.
It's like, no, you're fine. So I chose this particular kind of cover for the thumbnail and just like put it here because I just think this is like a really interesting perspective, like from this time and like
Yeah,
kind of how Avalon Hill saw itself.
yeah,
So we've got the Toy Fair. This is from 1967. And it's just a bunch of old farts, like thinking that the adult game market is limited. And I'm fascinated by that, given that we have an entire existence based on the presence of an adult game market.
yes, exactly. And yeah, but it's funny in a lot of ways because I think they saw really early on that the adult game market was definitely there, and I think the decades that followed demonstrated that. I think the 70s were definitely the first golden age for adult games and stuff like this. But what I think is also interesting in the comic is that at the end of the comic, you realize that those old farts that are actually other publishers, they also have plans to start releasing war games and stuff like this, and they were like, "Oh, this is really stupid" and everything, and acting as if they don't understand, but they are like, "We're missing out on something, and we need." And it's funny to see that at the end of the 60s, because I think, yeah, this is the volume 3 is 66, 67. We did
Yeah.
65, 66. So it's really getting to that point where they're becoming big. You can see that uh, they actually changed the location of their offices. They like you really feel it's funny to read and see that, oh, it's becoming serious. You have colors on the first page on the cover of the magazine. So it's really becoming big. And this comic is, I think it's a great pick. I was happy that you picked this for the cover of the chat.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I really love it. But yeah, I actually set up the next slide to kind of go on that same theme because this also what's interesting is that Avalon Hill
Mm,
recognizes at this point already that it's not just doing war games as it understands them, and so it's got like this kind of diversification thing that's going on as well, and it's like they almost don't know how to talk about it in some ways.
yeah, it's something that we touched a bit upon because we started seeing some hints of this in volume 2, 65, 66, because they really positioned themselves in the magazine as like serious games, like or more. involved games, and they already talk about economical games and sports games, and they look at sports like very seriously, using statistics and everything, having this like almost scientific approach to sports and how to represent it in games. And I mean, it's still a magazine that talks exclusively about war games, and that's their magazine. And they're still trying to say, well, we're a bit more than that. But then again, the magazine is called The General. It talks about history and everything, and it's a bit all over the place. But it's still there. Like they can sense like discussions that we're still having today. Where are the boundaries of our hobby? Where does it stop? Is it only games about real stuff that can be visualized through statistics, or is it more than that? Like there is a lot of questions that are interesting, but it actually made me want to play some of those. I've never played a baseball game, so I would be curious to actually try one of those one day, just to see how similar it feels in some aspects or not to some of the war games. Have you played any of those games?
I have not. So I've got Molotov Cockatiel telling us it's all math, everything, which makes me want to cry inside, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's true.
But I played Baseball Highlights 2045. I mean, I don't think that's the same thing, but I freaking love that game.
Yeah, this
that's
is
one of my
really
absolute faves. I love it.
Yeah, this is really good. So I was introduced to it by a friend called Luke, who works at Osprey Game, and it's one of his favorite game. And I thought it was really awesome. But I'm not sure those games are like that. Maybe they share some similarities. I don't know. But I would like to just try. I would be curious. I know that there are some more of the older grog nerds in the community that also play those games. Like they play 18xx, Hex Encounter, and baseball games, like super serious baseball games. And I'm always like, I want to see what's that all about. The problem is that I don't understand the rules of baseball, so that might be an issue to play those games.
You know, I can help you with that, Fred. Yeah. I watch a lot of baseball.
Good, but that would help quite a lot. Yeah. It's very confusing. I guess I get the gist of it. It's like cricket with more bases or something like this. That's right.
It is the best sports. One of these days we can just watch a baseball game together and I'll tell you what's happening. The other thing I think is really interesting about this though is I feel like they can't decide which tone they want to strike with their games, and it's really interesting. Like they're trying to be a bunch of different things, and it's making them feel a little bit of identity crisis. And I actually feel like this kind of identity crisis is continuing. So over here you got this like Shakespeare game set for summer release, and they're like, we think of this new concept as sugar-coated education, where players can enjoy themselves in the pursuit of culture. This revolutionized the entire educational industry. I mean, clearly they're being like a little bit silly, but they want to make a game about Shakespeare and like they want to kind of make that connection. But then over on the left, you've got like game spoofs, and Squander apparently has done well. And they say, well, holding very little appeal to most of you subscribers because it is out of the realm of complex games. Its success with the mass consumer market like has procreated additional ideas for new games. And so even within Avalon Hill, right, like there's like a little bit of a, so they don't say war games, they say complex games.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating.
I think complex game is really interesting as a term, and it also made me tick. Like there is a term in the board game industry in France. They have different categories of games, and most of the games that we play are in a category that's called jeux expert, like expert games, like games for experts of board gaming or experts on the topic. And you're going to have historical games, you're going to have more involved economical games and everything, and they regroup everything in that big category. They don't even think about, is it like historical or anything. Like for them, all of this is the same: root, oath, John Company, PAX Pamir, PAX Renaissance. Like, this is like expert game, like 18xx, one big bundle. It's like you're into expert gaming, you go and you play this, and they make no distinction. And when I saw this concept of complex games, even if they don't really formalize it, I think this is interesting. But it's also probably true. Like they are aiming at games that are a bit more involved for people who engage with games that are a bit more in depth, and they're trying to figure out how to convey that. But yeah, regarding the tone, I think it's interesting because it's something that we see from, I guess volume one, where the tone is a bit all over the place. It's very cheeky, it's very fun, but sometimes they want to show that they are serious, especially when they talk about the fact that some military personnel are actually reading their stuff, playing their games, and they are a bit like they're trying to to appeal to both the fact that the audience is still quite young. Most of them are 15, 16, clearly, and they don't want to take themselves too seriously, but at the same time they are in quest of legitimacy, and you have this tonal shift that is a bit all over the place, but I think it's quite charming. Honestly, I think it's quite cool. I like that it's not completely refined. I like that it's a bit yeah, I don't know, I think it's multifaceted. That's something that I enjoy. And I had no idea that they reused the Shakespeare game. Have you ever heard about it?
I had no idea. I didn't know about it until I read this. I'm hoping that Kevin Bertram, who's making the Shakespeare's first folio, can like tell us about it. Maybe he went back and looked.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at BGG right now. I want to find this Shakespeare game because I had no idea. It might be interesting, or it might be awful. Who knows?
Who
And
knows?
yeah. Oh, the game of Shakespeare, 1966. It must be that. Let us have a look. Oh, the rating is quite something. 4.8 on BGG. So that's and actually the board looks a bit like the Churchill board. So that's actually quite interesting. Definitely something to look into. But I found it, so I'll send you the link after the chat, and we can see if we want to do a live stream of Shakespeare the game. Like,
Oh, that'd be kind of fun. Let's see how like complex it is if it's like around. That'd
it
be
looks
pretty entertaining,
pretty
actually.
simple. I think it's rated at 1.7 in terms of complexity.
No,
So
that's too hard for me.
yeah, yeah. Fake gamer. That's the thing. It's too
That's
much.
me.
Yeah.
But I do think that I think we're still struggling as a hobby to talk about complexity. And so I think that this is like a super relatable discussion now. Like, think
Yeah.
about, we have terms like filler, and then there's like pushback on terms like filler.
Hmm.
Or, we talk about a gateway game, but some people are like, well, why does it have to be a gateway to anything? Why can't that just be the game?
Hmm.
I think that we're still kind of going through it.
Yeah, I'm not sure it will go away. Uh, I don't know. I think it makes. I think the games and the discussion about complexity always have to be in context. I think that depending on for me, the way I see it, depending on the dynamic of the person that I have in front of me, like I'm playing with someone that I usually play like very heavy games with, and before we do a game of, I don't know, Here I Stand or something like this, we decide to play a game like I don't know, The King is Dead. It's gonna take the role of a filler. It doesn't mean that I don't like the game as on its own, and that it might be the centerpiece of a game event that I'm having with other players. The thing that I don't like is to say that a game is a thing generally and not a game within a context. I think makes sense. And yeah, Black Sonata actually looks very interesting.
It's fantastic. That I
Yeah,
will say. It's wonderful.
yeah. Yeah, I would. So yeah, I was about to ask if you actually played it because I saw it. It got me super excited. But then again, it's a solo game, so I was like, "Fuck that shit! I don't want to touch it." But I was still intrigued. And I
Cancelled.
was,
Out.
yes,
No, Black Sonata is wonderful. Honestly, the way they managed to do solo hidden movement, I just can't even. It boggled my mind, like how smart that was.
yeah,
It's so smart. Like, it's one of those things where you see somebody think of something, and you're just like, man, I wish I was that smart.
yeah. Yeah. And eventually that's okay. Like you're thinking, well, I wish I was that smart, but it's out of reach. Sometimes people think about obvious thing, and you're like, how the fuck didn't I think about it? And that's really infuriating. But yeah. Oh, Stuart,
Stuart's stirring the pots.
stirring up shit. So for people who are wondering, I just released a video on the game Tanto Monta, and there is a lot of discussion regarding this game and a big line of saying that the game is actually good, and all the people criticizing or wrong is because the game is too complex for our little brains, and we are not true war gamers. That's basically the argument online from some people. But yeah, I don't think that the game is that complex. I think it's just very convoluted and not very streamlined. I still think it's an interesting game, but it's not a matter of complexity. So yeah, this game, Stuart, made me think about complexity indeed. But yeah, I hope
Yeah.
you're happy.
I have no clue about Santa Monta. I've not played it. I still would.
Yeah, I think if
Out of
you
pure curiosity. But
if there is a group, and if you can play with people who really like those kind of games and everything, I think you can have definitely a great time, especially if you don't have to read the rule book, you don't have to like facilitate the play, figure out how it works and everything. If you can have like a game master that is very experienced and everything, it might be a fun experience, but I don't think it's a game that you want to buy. Probably not. Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway.
So you put these together, so I'm going to make you introduce these.
Oh yeah. So this was for me, I think one of the first moments where I was reading something in the general and I was enjoying it not because of its historical context and the fact that I was reading a magazine from the 60s, but literally for its content. I was just enjoying it completely. I was like, this is brilliant. I want to read more of those kind of stuff. And I wish that I'm not saying it's not happening, but I think if I see stuff in magazines today, that would make me happy. Like I could read this today. And this idea is a series of articles that were released throughout the volume 3 of the journal. And I believe it might continue throughout volume 4. I haven't started reading them, so I'm not sure. But basically, you have two people writing this series. A guy called Frank Witz and someone called McMurdy, that are both former US military personnel, I think officers, and they are writing about principles of war and how they apply to game design. And it's super interesting because it's basic military doctrine, very accessible, but it puts into context a lot of design principles that comes in, but also so the way to think about game, make them, but also play them. And I just had a blast reading those. I thought it was super interesting, super insightful. And I think the mass and movement one was particularly fascinating because it really reminded me of the way I play when I'm playing a game like Napoleon 1806, because it's talking about how do you move and how do you concentrate, and how it's important to always think about those things. And it gives you some tips to actually think in terms of movement ratio and how much turn it's going to get you to point A from point B, but thinking about this holistically as a whole group of units, and how you're going to concentrate mass on a specific point that you think is going to be critical for you to succeed. And that's the way I think when I play a game like Napoleon 1806. I don't know if you've played Napoleon 1806 or 1807, Liz.
I'm not. It sounds like we should.
Yeah, I would be very happy to teach it to you and play together on stream or off stream. It's a series of games that I really like. It's a quite simple system of block games from a French publisher called Chacos. And I think what this game does really well is this idea that what was decisive in Napoleonic operational warfare was the ability to concentrate really fast on a single point and win a decisive victory. And this whole mass and movement article actually illustrates that. It more applies it to hex and counter, but the logic is the same. And this is also what I love, is that it's talking about specific games in a time and space, but actually the thinking around it applies to actually military doctrine like in real life, but also most of the games that you can play. And yeah, it's really super interesting. And it also made me reflect on how I'm going to play games in the future. So there is another article that was all around the principles of the objectives and how you should elaborate your strategy on 3 levels. You need to think about your local objective, your midterm objective, and the final objective that you're always thinking about. And I always feel like when I'm playing a game, I become really good at the game once I have a pretty clear idea of what I'm trying to achieve and what are the steps to go there. But I never have this idea that, oh, I'm going to sequence it in like short, medium, long, and how to structure this. And all of those articles actually connect together really well, because if you put everything together, you're like, oh, it's actually a full framework. And I was like, this is amazing. I would have been, but you know what I would like is that actually, if there was someone who was thinking about launching a new wargame magazine that is trying to do more in-depth article, more subtle stuff, I would love if they actually put all of those articles that were released in the journal and put them together as a compendium, all of those like well put together. That would be awesome. I'm just saying this for people who are in the chat that might have some ideas. I'm not want to spoil anything, but yeah, just planting the seed out there. This is the kind of stuff that I would like to see. That would be just amazing. Yeah, loved it. I don't know if you've read them or if you just went past them.
I skimmed some and read others, but I definitely agree with you that it's really neat to see, I guess, kind of some of the why explained this way, like why you would make certain choices, what they mean on a broader scale. I think that one of the hardest things when you're learning a game, especially like when we talk about complex games, right? Even if you understand the rules and like how to do stuff, understanding what you should do when and
Mhm.
why is actually, I think, the hardest part of being good at any game. And I also think that that's where, when you talk about war and wargaming, that's where the most interesting conversations can happen. It also makes me think of, like, this is exactly why, right, wargaming is so hot in the military right now.
Yeah.
Because you can read about this kind of stuff until you're blue in the face, but you have to do it in order to kind of see the lesson on the board. But this is like a neat bridge.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because actually, in the introduction of the principles of war for the war gamers, they actually say exactly what you're saying here. Is that, well, the problem with war is that there is no small way in. It's like, oh, I'm going to do a bit of war and to get to practice for the actual
Yeah, I'll just
war.
get my
It's like,
feet wet.
yeah, it's like it's just a war or not war. It's a binary, and they really say, well, actually the games are actually the only way that we have to bridge that gap, that you can realize the consequences of decision. And it's not, you're not just going to go on a war for practice. Like, so it is a great tool, like for this. It's not perfect, it avoids a lot of things, but it's the best thing that we can do, and it acknowledge that in a really interesting way. And I think it's really cool. And overall, I would say, so I'm planning on starting to play Stalingrad Roads. I don't know if you know this game. It's a game that was just released by Nuts Publishing, and it's part of the Roads series that was originally at Hexasim. They had Victory Roads, Liberty Roads. It's a big operational, grand strategic, but operational level hex and counter war game. And when I was reading this, I was like, oh, this is so much food for thought for me to think about the strategy on how I'm going to play this new iteration of the game, because it actually fits really well with those kind of operational thinking. I think it's really great. And yes, Stuart is once again trolling me in the chat, talking about Shakos. So yes, there is another game. There is new ones being developed for in the series. And the one has been announced. It's called Napoleon 1870, and it's a fun and clever take on the system because it applies it to a post-Napoleonic period, even if it's still a Napoleon that is in power. It's not the same, and changes some of the aspects of the game, keeps the core engine, but adds new elements like supply and stuff like this, but keeping the simplicity. So if you're interested in that kind of system, play 1806. It's the best entry point into the system, and then pre-order Napoleon 1870 when it's going to be open for pre-release.
One more thing this makes me think about before we move on is that, like the Avalon Hill volumes are so full of these really interested it amazes me how many times these people must have played their games in this time period, right? Like that front cover is like, oh, 21 releases, and wow, and that there's like 1,000 something games coming out each year now. People play things once through Avalon Hill. There's like these just really deep strategy articles from people who've clearly sat and played these. So like this is way before the invention of the 10 by 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
These people are playing the crap out of their games, and I think it's great actually that they're getting so much. And we are living in a state of relative board game riches, and maybe don't always get to know our games this well.
I think that's a really good point, and something that you mentioned. I think it might have been for episode one. I think you said something like, "Oh, by then having all of the war games was basically one shelf," and it was, yeah, that was basically that. And I think it's I also understand. Yeah, I like those simpler times, and maybe we should reflect on how could we apply like a collection minimalism to our war game collection and say, well, maybe we can concentrate on fewer games and just enjoy them more. This is also the reason why I don't have games in the background anymore. I don't want people to just buy more and more games or see how obsessed I am with collecting them, because I think it's actually quite stupid. Uh, and I think you're right. If you were to do that, how many games would you keep, Liz?
I mean, I have an issue because I do like variety. That
Yeah.
said, okay, so online board game implementations have changed how often I can get games in. I've probably played 50 games of Obsession this year on top of all the other stuff I do.
Mm.
So Obsession would stay, no question, because I play it all the time. And then there's games I wish I played all the time. Like I wish I played more Mage Knight. If I had all the time in the world and no need to cover anything, I would play that a lot. PAX Renaissance has just come on to BGA. I'm gonna make you play it with me
Yeah.
because I know that without having to like get it out and set it up, like I'll play it more. I've only played it once, and that one play was like enthralling, and so I would like a refresher to play that again because I was really into it. Um, actually, Mike has a good point. Some breadth and depth, some variety is good, but so is mastery.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, right? Like, I'd like to have a few games that I'm really, really a shark at, and then just enjoy most of them.
Yeah. But then you can enjoy games in your friends' collection, and that's also the thing. I think we don't think about our collections collectively enough. Something that I started thinking about when in London in the same group, we basically ended up in our club with 6 different copies of Oath, and I think the 6 people that had Oath were the people who were going to play together at the club, and I was like, I think we're a bit dumb here. Like
Yeah, like, why did we buy? Yeah.
we didn't
Although,
need,
by all
yeah.
means, support leader. But
Yeah, but I'm happy I have my copy. That's not the problem. But part of me was like, this is probably a bit stupid. Like, I probably didn't need one. Like, well, now I'm moving back to France, so I'm happy I'm gonna have my copy over there. But still, I'm thinking, well, that's at least 4 copy too many. that's
yeah,
that's for sure.
for sure.
I've never
But
played Mage Knight. That's the thing. Is it? It's
it's a
only solo, right?
masterpiece. No, but I wouldn't recommend playing anything other than solo. Maybe 2-player co-op, maybe.
Yeah.
It's so thinky. Like, it's really just better for one because you have to sit there and think about your moves for so long that everybody else will just hate you if you try to play that multiplayer. It's just so engaging though for me when I have it out that I'm just deeply happy every time I play it.
And what is the limit for you to actually being able to play it more frequently? Is it the setup that is big, or it takes a lot of time to play? Is it both?
It's the setup's not bad. It's that it just takes forever to play, and um, yeah, Stuart's being a heretic. He says he likes it best 2-player. You are a
Okay.
heretic.
No, then I would definitely like to ask Stuart if you can teach me. I would be keen on playing it with you if you like
Yeah.
2-player.
But it just takes forever. Like, it takes a long time to play it because you're gonna have to think it through. Like, you really, the thing that takes so long is what I like the best about it because you have this hand of cards. It's got a deck building element to it, but you're really just trying to milk the absolute most that you can out of sometimes really challenging hands for your situation. And so you're going to want to just really just wring out everything, but you also become more and more powerful and get these like cooler cards as you go that you're excited to play, but you need to play them to the max. It's a game where you start out very powerful, but you just get more and more and more. Like, you're taking out entire cities as like one person by the time you're done. And there's something, it's I like kind of being the Lone Ranger playing that game and just like entering that world and messing with the cards again and figuring out my favorite combos again and thinking like, oh, it's one of those dragons again. I really, really, it's been my number one forever, and I don't see it changing. I just don't know what can knock it off. First place for me.
Yeah, I would like to try it. Like, you sold me. It's just that I would, if I. The thing is that I would only play this if I can play 2 players. But if Stuart convinces me that it works 2 players, I think that would be good because it feels like the kind of game that I could appreciate. It's just that I would not spend so much time thinking and playing a game on my own. That's the thing. I don't have the
Brain too
mind for
smooth.
that.
I know.
Exactly.
Okay.
Very, very smooth. Completely. Yeah. So yeah, I cannot do that.
So Stuart promises you a great evening of fantasy adventures over beers.
Yes, this is exactly what I want. I want fantasy and beers. This is the 2 selling points. And
Whereas Molotov Cocktail says he makes solo a bit easier through cheating. The
well,
classic solo player's move.
yeah. And there is a starter version of Mage
Yeah,
Knight?
there's a Star Trek version. I'm a fantasy loyalist, but there is there's space Mage Knight as well.
I'm a big Trekkie, and I've never played. So that's the thing. I've watched all of the series, but I've never played a starter game. I was always worried that I would be disappointed, even if there is this like strategy one. I don't remember, Ascendancy, something like this. That I would like. It looks really good. So if there is a starter version of it, I would like to try it. But anyway, back to sorry
No, this is good.
to, to the
We're just
general.
hanging.
Yeah, and so this one I just wanted to highlight because it's something that they started talking a bit about, but I've never seen an article that much in detail. And I really felt like, oh, Volume 3 is getting different. They start to really go in depth into historical analysis of actual battles, and even though it is connected with games that they actually have released, it is not to talk about their game. They're really focusing on purely the military history of battles. And so this one is looking at specific battles for the campaign of Libya and Egypt in the early 40s, and it's really interesting. I was quite fascinated by this. I'm not sure why they did this, what was the intent, if they wanted to get people excited about military history books and stuff like that, or what it would lead to. And I'm actually quite curious to see how it expands, because they talk a lot about books. You have actually some buying guides to cover some topics, things that we already talked about in the past. So they talk a lot about literature, but it was the first time that I really saw them making diagrams and talking more really in depth into the history. And I was like, oh, that's actually quite new. And I'm actually curious to see how it evolves. And it's something that we see in magazines today. Normally, it's linked to a game that is in the magazine. So you have the game, and then you have an historical article about the history. So you get excited about the history, and then you get to play the game, and that's pretty cool. Um, and yeah, exactly. I got paid. I got paid. So yeah, there is this.
Don't
this
worry, we'll get to the other stuff too. But
yeah, this conspiracy theory. Yes, I'm a shill for big wargaming, especially
so
Avalon Hill.
remember when we found your father in the very first stuff? It's actually you're a time traveler. You are
Yes,
him.
exactly.
And
I'm actually the head of Avalon Hill. I'm just promoting my games in the future to make sure that we keep relevancy. So yeah. But no, I saw this and I was like, this is pretty cool. I'm really curious about how it's going to evolve, and I also love the hand drawn maps and everything. I think it's awesome. I was like, this is really fun. But yeah, I don't know if you were surprised to actually start seeing those popping up in the magazine.
I wasn't surprised, but I was really happy.
Yeah,
Like, I think that, if you want to do your games with some history, right? Like, this is exactly the kind of thing that's really fun to see. And, of course, I also enjoy like broader, like cultural and political historical work as it relates to games. But I also think stuff like this is super interesting. And I love the fact that teenagers in the 60s, at least some of them, right, were reading stuff like this because we know that Avalon Hill has that really mixed audience of adults and like essentially kids
yeah,
through the age range that I would teach. Um, it makes me so happy to see this level of like nerdiness about a battle happening. And I do think that this kind of thought going into these games is really fantastic. And actually, it fits really nice with the next slide, which I've selected these little bits out about talking about historical
yeah,
accuracy versus balance. And I think that those conversations like go together really well because it's still something that we're talking about in Wargame land, right? How do you balance between making something realistic if you're trying to make a historical game and also still fun to play? It's a challenge, but like they knew this was a challenge in 1966 and 1967. Um, so due to the historical accuracy of Avalon Hill games, it sometimes occurs that a game is created unbalanced in favor of the side that had the advantage in real life. Or when some people say that realism is an unimportant factor in wargaming. At the other extreme, people go all out to achieve realism and end up with a game too complex to play, or at least to enjoy playing. I feel like I've had that conversation with somebody in the past
yeah. Those
6
are
months.
yeah, and that's funny, and that's something that you also said in the past is that we read stuff and we're like, things haven't changed. We're still having the same discussion. The whole discussion on Stalingrad around, is it fair that it's unbalanced? Should it be balanced or not? Like, what do we expect from historical games? Is something that you keep having as a discussion, and there is no good or bad answers. It really depends what the designer wants to portray and what kind of game they want to make. But it's always the same discussions. It's really funny. Also, maybe a bit sad. Like, we never evolve. Maybe I don't know, or we don't resolve those questions. I'm unsure, but I also feel a strange sense of connection when I read those articles from people that might be dead, actually, for all that I know today. Actually, having the same kind of discussion that we have 60, 70 years later, 60 years later. It's really cool. But yeah, I don't know. what is your theory on how balanced Waterloo should be? Like,
I don't know about any specific. I think that it's always a matter of, are you presenting both players with, I guess, an interesting gaming experience.
yeah,
So Amabel's coming out with like doom and gloom battles you're destined to lose, basically for her
for
tabletop,
table battles, yeah,
for table battles, and so I mean, she's just embracing the despair. Molotov Cocktails mentioning, yes, like different victory conditions. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think David Thompson's done a good job with his Valiant Defense series of like kind of creating some of the hopelessness of certain situations, but like you do your best. Um, Mike is happy to just continue tackling questions as part of the journey. Be glad that interesting questions are not already solved. That's true too.
yeah.
I mean, if the question was answered, would we be having as much fun as we do?
No, probably not. That's a really good point. Yeah, it's fun to see those. Maybe we should try to find questions that have been solved, but like that's also a thing that is interesting. I like this idea of but I think like what you say, the doom and gloom expansion for table batters is a good example. And it was the same, I think, for some Men of Iron scenarios and some of those stuff where you have a lot of scenarios. Some of them are unbalanced on purpose, but they are also trying to make a point. It's like this was the situation, and basically this is why those people lost the battle, because they didn't have the right troops, they weren't positioned in the right way, and basically it was done like before it started. The result was already there. I think it's interesting to see because like through the game you understand why this is the case, but then as
Yeah.
a gaming experience, yes, it can be frustrating, but also it can be like if you embrace the doom, like it can it can be also quite fun. Like in a lot of games I like to play hopeless defense. I think it's often quite exhilarating because every small victory feels like a massive success, and I don't know, it can be, I think it's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I think a lot of whether that kind of game is enjoyable too depends on how interesting your decisions still are within the
Yeah.
space and how long the game is. Because if you're really, really working hard to just get crushed and like that, and it's all it's like I'm gonna play this for 8 hours and I'm also gonna get crushed and like I already know. I
Mhm.
mean, is that fun? You kind of maybe want it to be quick.
Yeah.
And I do agree about like having maybe different victory conditions. Like, well, can you do better than history, or like, can
Mhm.
you kind of do something with this situation? Like, all of that, I think makes sense. But I love that we're still having these conversations. Um, I it does make me feel connected with the past,
Yeah.
and I like that. You know, we have new answers sometimes because I think design is really changing with time and our sensibilities now about what makes a game good or like what a game should continue to have. Or I think that we're changing, but there are some sort of evergreen things that
Mhm.
people had right from the start, and that will probably go back to in several years, or it's like the cycle. Like, we are
Yeah.
eventually going to be old old war gamers in our 80s or something, and
Yeah, I mean,
we should still be getting on YouTube and complaining is what I think we
yeah,
should do.
maybe sooner than that. Yeah, and YouTube would be the boomer thing. And I really like this point by Mike. It's like most of the video games that we had until really late, you were supposed to lose over and over and over.
Yeah.
And that's something that disappeared, where you had consoles and you were supposed to finish the game. I think it's really interesting to say, well, actually Tetris, you play until the game breaks. Like this is the end of the game basically. So you play for the high score, which is interesting. And in a lot of ways, a lot of roguelike games that are coming back over the last 10 years or so, or even more, 15 years in video games are also this. You're going to die over and over and over, but you're just trying to like accumulate knowledge, more points. And maybe it's something that we should rediscover in board games. That could be fun. I think it's an interesting thought, and obviously something that humans crave, like getting better. I think it's quite, it reminds me a bit of uh, when you play Battle for Moscow. You're trying to figure out in how many turns can you win as the Germans, like something like this, and you're trying to solve that puzzle, which is a small mix of puzzle and luck, because obviously you never have full control over your die roll. But it's really cool. Yes, pitching a really hard solitaire game, Stuart. Yes, that's me. But yeah, I could do that. I think if it's, I think I could make a solitaire game if it was extremely mean to the players, and to punish them for playing solitaire. I think I could, I could definitely do that.
Indeed. All right, so now we have to talk about the awkward part.
Yeah,
Sorry, guys, it got awkward. There was so much. It was going so well,
I had so much love for them,
and
up
then
until the discussion. So I have mixed feelings. Part one, big cringe. Part two, interesting thoughts. But I will let you embrace, the Avalon Hill philosophy, which are two articles that are at the end of volume three, and both are at the top of the magazine. So they're actually important for them. This is really something that I want to put out there, and I want everyone to read at the end of their season.
yeah.
What did you think? Yeah.
Well, I was amused, but then I was sad.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So for those of you who want like sort of the TLDR, this one is basically joking that the Avalon Hill games are for people who don't have time for girls, and in fact, if you're playing all these games, you won't have time for them anyway. This is for hardcore game fanatics across the country who feel the need for literate upgrading in their pursuit of challenging recreation. So we're smarter than you,
Yeah.
and we don't need women,
Yeah.
and
It Yeah, it's very cringe. Maybe they were trying to talk to lesbians, but I don't think that was the vibe that we're going for. And I
no.
think it's no, and I was like, why? Why? I don't understand what purpose does that serve, because nothing else in the magazine this time around was mentioning this, and I don't know why they came so strong, on that, and it feels off. Like you read it and you're like, why? Where
Yeah,
did
like
you?
where does this
Yeah,
come from? Like,
yeah. It's so weird, and the rest of the volume is actually quite lighthearted. They make fun of themselves and everything, and this sounded very arrogant and full of themselves, and I was like, I don't understand this. And it's, yeah, I think it's, Molotov Cockatiel is saying this, it reads elitist, but that's definitely this. It's like it's super super elitist and a bit stupid and a bit out of touch. I didn't. Yeah, I don't understand. I just want to say that it doesn't represent the, like, 90% of the content, but it's
no.
still there. Yeah.
Also, I suspect, and so okay, I assume based on my current experiences too, right? Also, yes, I do work with a lot of insecure teenagers, and they do things like this sometimes. Um, but as a woman who plays war games, I find that I suspect that some of the men that I've played with say stuff like this when I'm not there. It's very rare to have somebody like be like this at me, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
like when I show up to play a game, even with somebody who I'm pretty sure they and I do not see the world the same at all. Like for the purposes of the game, we are perfectly capable of like having a good time, playing the game. Like I sort of feel like the other thing that's interesting is like this doesn't represent like the other articles. I also think it just doesn't necessarily represent the way that these people would behave in real life, face to
Yeah.
face, with just anybody who wanted to play games. Other than maybe like being a little bit of a jerk if somebody's like slow or having a hard time at first, like that there's probably an intolerance for that. I think that that's true in a lot of gaming spaces. But I strongly suspect that this is more chest thumping, trying to show off for somebody, probably just for each other. It still sucks though.
Which is very weird, because I think it's not even in the spirit of the article that it's in. Like, the
No.
article here is actually to encourage teenager to collaborate to the magazine, to take part, to be part of something, and not just consume passively, but actually publish their thoughts out there. And there is a sense of camaraderie that comes through it that I find really compelling. I like it. Like, I'm like, oh, it's really cool, but why is it coated in this shit? And I'm like, this
Yeah.
is so sad, and it's useless, and it feels a bit like pandering to a demographic, and I'm not even sure that resonates that well, because, like, those guys that are in the chess club, or as we seen in the finance club, they are not like, I don't know, like, maybe I'm wrong, but they don't look like the very, like, aggressively masculine kind of people. Like, they are nerds, so I don't understand what's the purpose of this. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's camaraderie that is mistake. It's at somebody's expense, but it just didn't have to be because it was
No,
working fine without.
yeah,
So, just for context, I'll share this tab just so people can see. There's also part two.
that I thought was super interesting and
Yeah.
very different in tone also.
So this one is more about historical accuracy, enlightenment on this topic. Um, it's much more, I think, in line with what we're seeing in the articles. Like this piece made sense with the other
Yeah,
stuff that we saw and enjoyed.
and I think this was great because it resonates a lot with what you were showing earlier, with the whole discussion around historicity. And they talk about how they make their game and how they approach historicity in gaming. So you have a bit of an insight into the sausage factory, like how they're making it. And
Not
the
just the
thing that,
sausage party.
yeah, yes, exactly. Pun unintended, but I will take it. And I think it's quite interesting because first of all, they keep talking about historicity, but then when they say about which game they are going to select for publishing, they call about sales potential. And you're like, wait a minute. How does that work together? Like, how can you be completely obsessed with the sale potential of something and how you're going to depict it with the historicity and the other and saying it's educational and this is really good. I like where it's getting. Yeah, and you're like, okay, this is a bit off. But what I love about this is that they talk about specifically one topic that I've been very interested in. They talk about the East Front and how to make historically accurate game about the East Front while being in the US. Well, they don't say while being in the US, but basically that's it. Well, it's the Cold War. They don't have access to any information on the other side of the wars, that they don't know what happened. They don't have access to archive from the Soviets and stuff like this, and they basically only work based on archives from the Germans. And it's funny because at some point you realize that they are almost on the verge of realizing that this is an issue, but they actually retrofit like this thing about how it's actually not a problem, it's the best thing ever. And you're like, how can you be so delusional? And they were like, actually, in this article they say we think that Stalingrad is probably the most historically accurate game that Avalon Hill has ever released, because we have really good orders of battles coming from German high command, and we know how Germans were attentive to details, and it must be correct. And it's like, dude, they lost this battle, they lost this war, they were probably wrong about a few things. Like, if not, it would have happened. And we do this in retrospect. We've seen some designers like Jake Rady that tried in the 80s to push back on this and say, we are completely wrong about this, it's only based on stuff that we got from the Nazis and everything, it cannot be relied upon. And when Titans clashed and books like this were released, we realized how wrong we were about these fronts. But it's really interesting to see, because it's the beginning of this, how delusional they could be while still having all of the elements to understand why they were wrong about. And just to be clear, yes, I am communist, but the person who wrote this book, David Glantz, is not. And I would really recommend that you read this. And it tells you why we were wrong about these fronts and why the Soviet military was very different than the way it was portrayed in history, but also in pop culture and by extension in war games at that time. So that's quite interesting. But yeah, and for me, that bit of history, that discussion was really fascinating because it was a great illustration of what was wrong about games on this front at that time. It was like a fascinating read, really interesting.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times our historical sources are the best we have. That doesn't make them great. Like I spend a lot of time thinking about this with my students because of Julius Caesar, right? Like,
Mm.
our accounts of the Gallic Wars are Caesar
Yeah.
propaganda. And I'm sure a lot of what he says is true. And I'm sure he really did do a lot of stuff that was like impressive, like the Battle of Alesia is like wild. However, we also know that Caesar wants to downplay his faults. Um, and so, it's actually, I love all this kind of stuff because when we talk about representation and listening to who you can trust and politics, I feel like this is why I'm always going back to those things, even when it's like just details of battle, because it's never just details of battle. There's always more. There's always
Mm.
personalities involved. There's always politics involved. There's always representation involved in whatever sources tell us what happened.
And this is what
And
makes it interesting. Like,
yeah,
it's like, yeah, and I feel it's both naive and also a bit missing the point to not think about those things. I mean, we're human. That's what makes history interesting. The way we make it, the way we present it. This is, I don't know. It's like not seeing it is childish and, I don't know, missing the point. I guess.
For me, it's just a richer experience. Like, I really like to navel gaze and I really like to think about this stuff, and it just brings me an added layer of enjoyment to the gaming.
Yeah,
So
I agree. Yes, our
we're all
copy of
laughing
Red
about what
Flag Over Paris.
our
Our
copy of Red Flag
copy.
Paris. Hey, well, it is available on Rally the Troops for free. So I'm just
Yeah,
saying, at least
exactly.
you're living up to your ideals.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
then the
Good
last thing
conclusion.
we're going to talk about is
Yeah,
Wargame magazines coming on strong.
this is
So
awesome. Yeah,
I love this. So yeah, we're talking about like a year ago, which we were reading the articles from a year ago. You did
yeah.
have to look far and wide to read anything about the growing cult of war games. We're a cult, everyone. Congratulations. Which I guess we're multiple cults now. We're just like different.
Yeah, different chapels. There were a few schisms. Yeah,
Well, we are superstars of woke religion, Fred.
yeah,
So suddenly, so there's like a good dozen or so periodicals designed to bring the reader all aspects of wargaming. And this last quote is the editorial philosophy of strategy and tactics, a brand new 12-page publication. And so the competition, stepping up, entering the field
yeah.
of battle with Avalon Hill.
Which is awesome because they are excited about it, which I think
Yeah,
is great because for them it's they see it in the right way. That is a proof that it's a growing hobby that more diversity, more richness, more different perspective is gonna bring this hobby to what we will know in the 70s, like a few years after this. And it's funny to have this new up and coming magazine, Strategy and Tactics. Like from our perspective, it's like it's insane to read that. It's like it's funny to see, oh, this is when they come up. That I don't know. It was 12 pages. And it was edited by a guy that was doing this as a side job while stationed in Japan. I don't know. It's just great story to think about all those things. It's yeah, it's just really cool. Yeah, it wasn't a competitor yet, but it's
yet.
interesting to see this excitement and everything, and just to have this magazine appear. And I guess that should open up also our discussion around where should we go from there. Should we keep
Right.
on the general only? Should we start opening to strategy and tactics and doing some comparison on what they were covering year by year? I don't know. It's open to discussion.
I would personally I mean, is this the thing about the reason that we go through the general is because all the PDFs are just online. So we
Yeah.
managed to find, like, we've got, the general is all on a website. So I don't actually know where we'd find a copy of this, but if we can find one, I'm sure we can. Somebody has to
I'm
upload it somewhere,
pretty
right?
sure that someone has scanned everything, and that if we ask and we don't say that we got it from them, there is probably someone watching this or someone who would see this on VGG that will just send us like a Dropbox with all of the strategy and tactics PDF on there. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe a friend of Mike, actually, that is. So that's possible. I wouldn't be. Yeah. So we just have a call out there. If you have the strategy and tactics or know where we can find them, the one from the late 60s, let us know.
Yeah, because I would actually really like to read it like as a companion.
Yeah.
Like I'd like to keep going through the journal because I feel like we keep seeing cool evolution still. Like we haven't hit kind of like where it's samey yet, if we will. But
He'll fax them to us. Yes, yeah, definitely. We can figure that out. We can get a fax machine just for the show.
yes. I think there's one in my school office, but I don't know if it receives faxes. I know it sends them. We could work it out. But yeah, I would actually really like to see that because we've read the first one, but certainly not the only.
Yeah.
And there's so many like really cool bits of writing. One thing that I love every time I like talk to Valko about anything, right? He's always like writing a piece for C3I or for just like some sort of publication. Harold's got SD Hiscon has its own conflict of interest publication that's doing. There's a definite link between wargamers and wanting to write about their stuff in an organized way. And I think that we should like diversify if we can get our hands on stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to do that. And I think it's also a reminder for us that also a way for us to engage with the hobby and engage with the future gamers is also to write down stuff. I don't know how much the videos will stay online, how much of it will disappear. And I think in writing there is more, maybe more potential, um, even more in the printed format. So yeah, I think we need more. I think I would like to see more magazines that talk about war games, n- not the products, but war games, the concept. Like more things that were a bit more like Battles magazine, for example,
Yeah.
or something that Senate does for board games. I think I would like to see that more, and I would love to write for something like this to engage with future war gamers. Like, I think
Yeah.
that would be nice.
Although it's
Um,
interesting you talk about preservation. So actually, plug for my upcoming podcast episode in about 2 weeks. So it'll be episode 5, and episode 4 comes up on Monday. I interviewed Henry Lowood from Stanford, and he is their archivist for their video game and like digital
that's
games
really
collection.
cool. Yeah.
And actually, it's in my email. I need to like read it and respond. But he sent me a deed of gift to look over because I'm going to give them the files for the Beyond Solitaire podcast to store separately
Oh, that's awesome.
in the Stanford library. So, like, there are people out there who preserve this stuff.
This is great.
Actually, we should get him on. He talked in the interview, so spoilers for fun stuff ahead, about how they used to play by mail and how they handled the die rolls. So we
Yeah,
should actually have him on for an
that
episode of
would
Wargame
be.
Archaeology to talk
Yeah,
to us about play by mail.
yeah, because that's one of the things that I'm wondering about. How do you take into account randomness when you were playing by actual mail? So yeah, super super
So
interesting stuff.
he explained it. It was wild, and we should have him on again to talk about it
Yeah,
because it was
that would be awesome. That would be great. That would be really really great. Cool. But yeah, another very fun volume to go through. It was really cool. I'm happy that we got back to it, and looking forward to the next episode. Probably after aircon. We have aircon in the UK mid March, but after that, I think it would be great to catch up. And I was wondering if we should play another of those older games. Or maybe we can take recommendations, or if you have any ideas. But I still want to play some of those old Avalon Hill games, because I really had fun engaging with D-Day, playing it multiple times, and finally get to through the rules after a while.
yeah.
It was
We should
fun.
have Stuart come on, and we can all look at Gettysburg.
Yeah, that could be fun. That could be really really fun. And as Stuart knows, I don't know anything about the American Civil War, but I know a lot about Gettysburg. I have no idea why, but yeah. So we could do that. That would be great. Cool. But yeah, no, that's quite awesome. Thanks again for inviting me, taking this risk, Liz,
Oh, so risky.
of having me on the show. But yeah,
But no, I love doing this. We mentioned it actually on the last controversial episode, but it remains true, which is that I love that we have the ability to talk to so many people who have been around since the beginning. Like, it's good to start learning about recording your history while there are people around to discuss it with. And I hope that other people kind of go on this same journey. Like, all the Avalon Hill stuff is online. I'll put the link in the show notes, actually, so people can go read some of this
yeah,
themselves. But it's really cool. It's a really neat walk through the history of a hobby that I've really like fully adopted. It's really it's good to feel connected to the past. I think. I mean, if you're a historical gamer, like, doesn't that make sense? That's what you would want to do, is
yeah,
like get used to your history.
yeah.
You know.
And I think it's something that we don't necessarily consider. Like, even I say, like, my show is about history and board games, and it's not that often that I talk about board games history. Like, I only focus on the other side of the coin, which is how history is portrayed in board games, but not enough on how board games or war games specifically evolved. So I'm happy that we're doing this, and I think we should do more of it. I think it's really really cool. Um, Super happy. I want to do it more, 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 more.
Yes,
Liz, we should
indeed.
do it more.
Although our next project is not Wargame Archaeology, I have you on the calendar to stream Stilico.
Yeah, Stilico for Once a Crowd. I think this next episode. Let me check my calendar. Wait a minute. Next week I have John Butterfield on the show, so that's not that.
No, it's I
It's
have
the
you
week after
for
that. It's the
March
5th.
5th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 5th of March. We're going to be playing Stilico for my series on solo games. I'm trying to postpone all of them as far as I can because I try to push back on this. But Stilico looks really, really great. So I think it's going to be really fun. So yeah, that should be cool. Excellent.
All right, so we'll be back soon with another episode of Wargame Archaeology. I'm so glad that y'all came and that we had this lovely chat. Fred, as always, welcome on the channel, except for when you're canceled.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That's the game. You're the queen of consolation, so that's fair.
Yeah. Hey, look, I've still got the hat.
You've got.
Can put it on and cancel you right now.
You technically should always wear it, and at the end of the show, I should always get canceled. I think it's like you're canceled, and that's the end, and
it's the inevitable end of everything.
Yes,
forever canceled. Forever canceled. All right. So that is it for today, and yeah, I will catch y'all next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.